Okay, today we're going to take a look at how to calculate the slope from a given table. Right, so we know that these tables represent different functions, right? And then we have these points that represent the points in a function. Since we're dealing with linear functions, that means we're going to have a line, right? So yeah, as I said, these points represent the points in a line, right? Or the function. So could be something like 0,4, right? We have a line with these points, 4,6 and 8,8. Okay, so until now, the way we were finding the slope was graphically. We were only counting the squares we moved up and down, right? And we were counting also the squares we moved left or right. Right? But now we can see the line, right? We don't have a graph to look at. Now we only have points. So here's when it comes our first formula, right? So the first formula tells us that the slope is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. All right, so that's our first slope formula. Now, what do y2, y1, x2 and x1 represent? Alright, let's take a look at this line. First, we're gonna choose 2 points. Alright, I'm gonna take this point and this point. Alright, and now we're gonna define what's gonna be our first point. I'm gonna take this as my first point and then this as my second point. Alright, so now since we choose this point to be our first point, that means here we're gonna have x1, and we know that this 4 is y, and since we're dealing with our first point, that means this is gonna be our y1. Alright, and the same thing here. So we know that this is x, but since we're dealing with our second point, that means that's gonna be our x2, and the same thing here, that's y, and since we're dealing with our second point, that means it's gonna be called y2, right? So now we know what's x1, y1, x2 and y2, right? All we have to do is substitute it in the formula, right? So we end up with m, it's equal to our y2, which is x, minus our y1, which is 4, divided by our x2, which is 8, minus our x1, which is 0, right? And we end up with 4 over 8, which is the same as 1 over 2. All right, and that's how we find the slope of a function analytically. All right, just by looking at just by knowing the points, because remember we're not looking at the graph, we only know the points of the function, right? So now let's do a. So again, as I said before, these numbers represent the different points in a graph, in a function, right? And I said that we're gonna choose only 2 points, right? I'm gonna choose this point 0,7, and I'm gonna choose, I don't know, this other point 3, -5, right? And I'm gonna choose my first point as, I'm gonna call it P1 because that's gonna be my first point. I'm gonna choose my first point to be 0,7, and my second point, it's gonna be the other one, 3, -5. Okay, so yeah, as I said before, since this is our first point and this is our second point, that means this is gonna be x1, this is gonna be y1, and this is gonna be x2, and this is gonna be y2, right? So now we just apply the formula, which is, remember, let me write it here, which is m is equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1, right? So yeah, we just apply the formula, and we say the y2, which is negative 5, minus y1, which is 7, divided by x2, which is 3, and minus x1, which is 0. So we end up with negative 12 divided by 3, which is the same as negative 4, right? So we know that the slope is negative 4, right? The slope of A is equal to negative 4, right? So now let's move to the second one, to B. Alright, so again, all we have to do is take 2 points, right? So I'm gonna take 0,5 and 4,21, right? So again, I'm gonna choose those points, and I'm gonna choose one of those to be my first point, and again, it doesn't matter the order, right? It's gonna be the same answer. So I'm gonna choose 0,5 to be my first point and 4,21 to be my second point, right? So that means this is gonna be x1, this is gonna be y1, this is gonna be x2, and this is gonna be y2, right? Okay, so again, we apply the formula, right? And we end up with y2, which is 21, minus y1, which is 5, divided by x2, which is 4, minus x1, which is 0. And we end up with, that's 16 divided by 4, which is equal to 4, right? And we have that the slope of B is 4. Now let's continue with C. So again, we're gonna choose 2 points, and the same thing. I'm gonna choose my first point to be 0,0. Okay, so I said my first point to be 0,0 and my second point to be 4,1, right? So that means this is x1, y1, x2, y2, right? So we just apply the formula, we end up with 1 minus 0 divided by 4 minus 0, and we end up with 1 over 4, right? So the slope for C is 1 over 4, right? And finally D, the same thing. We're gonna choose 2 points. I'm gonna take 0,4 and I don't know, I'm gonna take this 14,11. Use so that you see that it doesn't matter what points you choose, alright? So now I'm gonna choose my first point to be 14,11 and my second point to be 0,4. Right, so again, I'm doing this because I want to show you that it doesn't matter the order, right? So I said 14,11 and 0,4, right? So again, we just apply the formula, right? Which is y2, which is 4, minus y1, which is 11, divided by x2, which is 0, minus x1, which is 14, alright? And we end up with negative 7 divided by negative 14, which is the same as 1 over 2, right? So we end up with m equal to 1 over 2 for D, alright? And that's all for today. Thank you for watching.